Friday forecast calls for a slight chance of a shower, maybe some scattered storms in the afternoon, otherwise partly sunny, highs around 80. Friday night, scattered showers and storms before midnight, a low of 63. On Saturday, scattered showers and storms in the afternoon, cooler, a high of 68. Saturday night, showers and storms before midnight, overnight lows around 58. By Sunday, showers likely early, otherwise mostly cloudy, and 66. From BlueRidgeLife.com, I'm forecaster Tommy Stafford. Now, back to Joe Thomas in the morning.
Joe Thomas in the morning. Thank you for joining in and tuning in and taking our positions. Live, real calls. That's what we finally decided on the play on the expression that you often see in gringy, dingy neon lights above, let's call them nightclubs without windows. Okay? It's live, real calls. That's what we're going with. That's the expression. Live, real calls, 434-882-4217. Who's next on the poll? All right. I may have gone too far on that one. But it is a Friday morning, and we've got a lot to get into. I wanted to spend a little time this morning giving some kudos to a dear friend who I haven't talked to in a while, but did some Herculean work for me for no other reason than he thought it was important. And so for that, I want to give some time to Tom Chapman and the folks at the Albemarle Charlottesville Historical Society today, because they've done some great work on something that, at first blush gets you prickly, like others, because the story is coming out as reclaiming their history. And there is no such thing as reclaiming history. History is what history is. And this is one of those narratives of Dr. Harry Rogers. Apologies. You know him as Ibram X. Kendi. This idea that history isn't history. History has been a lie, and we're going to reinvent a whole new history. And Tom doesn't, and the folks at the Albemarle Charlottesville Historical Society, they roll off that, perfectly, and they're a great group, and they did some Herculean work regarding finding the likely denizens of a bunch of grave sites outside of a family cemetery in Penn Park in Charlottesville, which had been a plantation, as many these parks and things that we have are. And there's the UVA North Research Park was a family farm and a huge tract of land that the Burkhead family, folks like that will deed the land to do other things with. So, you may think of it as a place to go play a quick round of golf or frisbee golf or anything like that. But Penn Park was at one time a plantation, as Carsbrook was, and so many of these other places in central Virginia, or a honest to goodness, any place in Virginia. So they unearthed, there's always been this family cemetery kind of off in the corner there from the 18th and 19th centuries, and then they discovered a few years back a whole bunch of graves outside of the family wall, the slave population. And there's a raging debate in this regarding whether or not giving a Christian burial to a member of your slave population is honoring them or not. I think it is, but that's because I believe God believes all of us are created equal, and if some of us haven't been treated that way, He's watching. So I want to get some time on that. Also, I don't know if you saw this. We may lead with this. So save the Trump trial stuff for a moment here, because President Trump, no trial today. The jury was sent out of the courtroom yesterday afternoon after more cross-examination of Michael Cohen. And they won't be in because it's Barron Trump's graduation, and the judge has allowed the defendant to attend his son's graduation. So they'll be back at it Monday. But yesterday there were a whole bunch of congressional delegations, and it was interesting how the 5th Virginia congressional district primary manifested itself at this event there. We'll get into that. Also, former Commonwealth's attorney has ascended to the most powerful job in Central Virginia that you probably don't even know about. Denise Lunsford has been promoted. She was one of the higher-ranking officials within the Albemarle Service Authority, which runs the water faster than you can say Chinatown. You understand, if you control the water, you control what's going on. And there's a lot of money that goes through there, too. Gary O'Connell, who's been there for 15 years, is after being city manager for 15 or 20 years. I think it was 15 years. As city manager, then moved to the Albemarle Service Authority. That should tell you something. You were the city manager, ostensibly the mayor, the guy who runs the city of Charlottesville, and you step down from that to the Albemarle Charlottesville Service Authority? Oh. That's your first indication that it's more powerful than being the city manager or even Commonwealth's attorney, I imagine. But Denise Lunsford getting up into that. We're coming up on the 70th anniversary, Brown versus Board of Education and the impacts in Virginia. RFK Jr. says he's got the numbers to qualify by CNN's rules to be on the stage in these two debates. Will they include him? Are they in a box? Once they set the standards, and they said, I think the one that they figured would trip Kennedy up the most was you have to be on a sufficient number of states' ballots to collect 270, potentially 270 electoral votes. And he apparently is confident that he will be there. I don't think he's there yet, but he will be. But they tried to set it high on that. Also on today, Steve Hayner from the Thomas Jefferson Institute. We're going to talk about the budget deal. Is this a throwback Friday to the old days when, people in the General Assembly work together on stuff, cross-party lines. And why does it have to be as big as the budget for that? So we'll get into that. And back from New York into the 5th District, Virginia Congressman Bob Good will join us. So let's begin with the I don't say it's silly. I find some of this to be street theater. I understand President Trump's point, and I'm sure if I was in that position and there were cameras that were interested in hearing what I said after a trial where cameras are not allowed in the courtroom. OJ got cameras in the courtroom, but not President Trump. So I can see his reasoning to want to stand there, stop there where he can, and give a little statement there. But in support were an awful lot of members of the Virginia 5th Congressional District delegation, and I say that because it is do we have the video? Okay. This is the report on how the 5th Congressional District kind of tried to outdo one another in this GOP primary race while hanging around President Trump. Some, I guess, invited, some not. But you be the judge of that.
Candidates that are both trying to show voters their close ties with the former president, even making the trip to New York today. Let's get right to that video that you're about to see. Now, if you look closely at that video, you can see Trump speaking before court this morning, but you can also see 5th District Congressman Bob Good on the side back there on the left side of your screen. And then right on the right side, you can see his primary challenger, John McGuire. Then after the race, there is Bob Good standing next to Matt Gaetz during a social media scrum. And McGuire comes walking up right alongside Good for his part, calling the whole trial a sham.
We saw the perjurer in chief, Michael Cohen, multiple times admit and acknowledge that he has lied under oath, he's perjured himself, and yet we're supposed to believe his testimony as the star witness against President Trump. This is lawfare, again, to try to steal or to rig an election.
McGuire did not speak during the statements after the trial, but tells CBS 19 News that he wasn't there to face his opponent. Instead, he was there to support the defendant.
I think for me, it was all about Trump today. I think my opponent tried to make it about him, but I don't want to get into that. But it was more about supporting Trump. And like I said, I've been there with him since he came down the escalator. And the people in the 5th District, the polls, I don't know if you've seen the polls that came out, but they're certainly reflecting that they want folks that support President Trump.
So the 5th Congressional District is one of those districts that President Trump carried in Virginia in 2020. So you understand the derby between these two candidates for the 5th Congressional District. Did they help themselves? And this is the question I want you to answer. It's 434-882-4217. Live, real calls. Does the appearance of and that video of the two candidates kind of trying to get into the crowd behind President Trump, I don't know if that helps. I have a lot of celebrity photographs, pictures of me with, Ted Nugent and Tommy Shaw and the rest of the damn Yankees, or Jim Belushi, and I've got all kinds of celebrity photographs. Most of them I'm standing next to, quote, the celebrity. And I just don't know, because Congressman Good was there, obviously invited, and he was standing with the House Freedom Caucus folks there behind the president. I get the visual. I understand the political landscape. I understand the political importance of that real estate, of being seen in the crowd with the popular kid, if you will, to boil it down to what high school was like as well for many of us. So you want to be seen in that group with the star quarterback or the homecoming queen or anything like that. And you're like, oh, look, that's me. See, that's my head over there in the back. I just don't recall that ever winding up being much for me. And Congressman Good will be on, and so I understand the president wants to be seen with a crowd of supporters behind him, I understand the logic to that. But I just don't know if running, in being in that crowd in the back, is a boon or a bane. You heard Senator McGuire there at the end call in. He doesn't respond to my texts anymore and my petitions to have him on the show. So we'll suffice with his comments there. And John, if you're out there, or anyone who knows John, I keep asking, and you don't come back there. But I just the whole street theater around this just struck me as cringeworthy. I don't know if it struck you the same way or not, because it's that kind of cult of personality stuff that I think a lot of us, we blanch from. I understand that it works. I understand that it's real. I understand that it's going to have impact in Virginia's 5th congressional district race. But again, the disproportionate power that the presidency has currently is probably why I feel this way, more than an indictment or a concern about either of the two men running for the GOP nomination or any in the House Freedom Caucus or even President Trump. Is the disproportionate power, this trying to elect a king every 4 years. It's crazy making. If we want to do the king thing again, go back to that painting from Annapolis where the House was ready to crown George Washington, and he said, no, that's not what we fought about. But we have allowed it to metastasize on the body Americana. Remember, use us or asphalt, our friends at Pyramid Paving. And May 25th, join me on location live broadcast from Vets for Vets at Gypsy Hill Park in Stanton. It starts at 10 a.m., raising money for all these great vets causes. VFW is particularly the beneficiary of your entrance fee to that as well. So please join us for Vets at Gypsy Hill Park. And so we're going to visit with some of the organizers a little bit later on this morning on the program to talk about this important fundraiser.
Your Friday forecast calls for a slight chance of a shower, maybe some scattered storms in the afternoon, otherwise partly sunny, highs around 80. Friday night, scattered showers and storms before midnight, a low of 63. On Saturday, scattered showers and storms in the afternoon, cooler, a high of 68. Saturday night, showers and storms before midnight, overnight lows around 58. By Sunday, showers likely early, otherwise mostly cloudy, and 66.
From BlueRidgeLife.com, I'm forecaster Tommy Stafford. Now back to Joe Thomas in the morning.
This is the Racing Wire Minute with Brian Belansky.
Remembering Eddie Gossage. That story next.
The Racing Wire Minute is presented by
Learn more at She Can STEM, a message brought to you by the Ad Council.
Eddie Gossage was a larger-than-life figure, a career racetrack guy with stints at Nashville and Bristol before working for Bruton Smith at Charlotte. Then, in 1995, he went to Texas Motor Speedway, and the rest was history. He grew Texas from just a NASCAR track by luring Indy cars and World of Outlaws. Let's not forget the Big Hoss, a nearly 23,000 square foot TV on the backstretch. Gossage retired in 2021 to spend more time with his grandkids. Eddie Gossage died at the age of 65.
Joe Thomas in the morning, and thank you for doing the YouTube or the Rumble, and whether it's now or later. And somebody asked me that in the email, jtinthemorningradio@gmail.com. He says, Joe, I was watching your show, and all of a sudden I tried to call, and I got voicemail, and I realized your show is on from 6 a.m. till 8 a.m. When you post it to Rumble and YouTube after 8 a.m., could you put some notification that it's not live anymore? Good question. And we'll endeavor to. I know that some programs put a little chyron on there, saying recorded earlier. But if you hear me say live real calls, it's between 6 a.m. and 8 a.m. And we have wiggle room at 8. It's not we can go over a little bit if we do, but live real calls at 434-882-4217 between 6 and 8. If you do call after 8, leave the voicemail. We'll play it back on the next day's show and get you involved in there. Believe me, we're creating some interesting things for our newsroom to come. Whistleblower lines and things like that will keep you engaged and connected as best you can. But however you do it, you can also email to jtinthemorningradio@gmail.com. So Senate Intelligence Committee Chair Mark Warner was out again, saber rattling on the issue of election security yesterday.
In a recent Senate Intelligence Committee hearing, Chairman and Virginia Senator Mark Warner and other members discussed the potential for foreign threats. They heard from leaders in the FBI and other experts in security and intelligence. Warner highlights 3 reasons for concern: easy and cheap interference in American elections, influence of conspiracy theories on Americans, and the impact of AI.
We've got enough differences between Americans. We don't need foreign governments amplifying that, or in many cases, as we saw in 2016, potentially trying to drive Americans literally to violence against each other.
He says the government needs to keep an eye on countries like China, Russia, Iran, and potentially others who may try to cyber attack our infrastructure or spread misinformation.
So the question remains then, is the senator calling you dumb because you don't have the capability of digging in? And there's a simple fix, and I'm going to tie 2 stories here into this. It becomes harder to manipulate an election that happens one day a year. And because you give enough time for all the information to play out. The whole point of Election Day was that we all gathered at one point after collecting as much information as possible. Understand, that's the crux of the Trump trial in New York as well, that keeping salient information from you, like that he had been accused of having a dalliance with a porn star, would have changed the outcome of the election. If that's the premise, then Hillary Clinton calling all of Donald Trump's supporters a basket of deplorables probably is election interference as well. If you're going to define this in this narrow way, in this idea that any information is going to manipulate the election, isn't then every mailer that shows up at your house election interference? Isn't every phone call you receive from somebody who's saying, hi, I'm calling from the so-and-so campaign, isn't that election interference? Isn't the whole premise then, and this is the key itching powder that you may feel under your shirt, is that somebody is telling you that these elections no longer work. That's the key takeaway, is that the concept of our election system doesn't work, and you need to give it up. And it's all part of a concept called liquid democracy. It was written by a philosopher, minor league Karl Marx type, not quite as well known as Saul Alinsky. But then again, there was a day that nobody had ever heard of Saul Alinsky outside of Hillary's house. I think she wrote the foreword to one of the reprintings of Rules for Radicals, in the time. But this philosopher, this political philosopher, Charles Dodgson, wrote about this stuff called liquid democracy, in which your vote is like a currency, the same way your carbon credits are a currency or your NFTs are somehow a currency. And you can trade them, and you can use them, you can sell them, you can barter them, whatever you want, so that we get 100% turnout election. Government officials in some cases use this premise to say, well, if you didn't show up, we can have a proxy vote in your place. The perversion of his simple theory that we need to get everyone to vote all the time on everything, which has its own innate perversions, first off smacks of somebody who doesn't understand I think he understands representative republicanism, lowercase r, but doesn't like it. Because the Marxists, the authoritarians, they love themselves. Just vote on everything. Come every Thursday is voting day. Come on down to the Politburo headquarters, and it's voting day. Your lunch hour's twice as long, so you can come down to the Politburo headquarters and vote. We're going to vote on these things. I don't know anything about these things. Well, toss a coin. The ruble in your pocket isn't worth anything. Just use it as a coin flip. So the Marxist loves this cult of democracy, or as several of you like to call it, democracy, because when we hear that people are an existential threat to democracy, what they're actually saying is they're an existential threat to a member of the Democratic Party winning the next election, thus democracy. So Mark Warner's saber rattling on this idea that you hearing things about the election is election interference. Did I interfere with the election by sharing you the story of John McGuire and Bob Good in New York? One could make the case if you grow what Mark Warner is saying out and let it expand like that foam insulation. That's its inevitable goal, is that you will no longer trust elections, so we no longer have to have elections. There's a parliamentary procedure that they use in Congress. Last time I remember it being famous was during this program called the Patient Protection and Affordable Care Act. Do you remember that? It was classically a congressional action that didn't protect patients or make health care more affordable, but that's irrelevant at the time. It was signature of an administration so much that it became known by the name of the president that wanted it, Obamacare. And they used a parliamentary procedure called deem and pass, so that once something had passed a committee, it was deemed as part of something that had already passed before. It was amended onto a bill that had already passed, and that the amendment was cleared through a committee. So once the amendment was okay, it's deemed to have passed along with all the other stuff that was already passed. And I believe the original bill it was tacked on for was like ice for cold milk in elementary schools, or something that has absolutely nothing to do with patient protection or affordable care. But that's where we're headed on a nationwide. We are going to take surveys. There will be pollsters. The Quinnipiac people will become they will be the Electoral College. Pun intended. They'll take a poll. What kind of person do you like? I like this guy. And that poll, 8,000 people in America will be polled, and whoever wins that poll will win the election, deem and pass. That's the kind of thing Mark Warner is talking about. And if you say all this stuff sounds crazy, Joe, it sounds like the machinations of some twisted mind that could come up with such fanciful flights of imagination. Who's this Charles Dodson guy? Well, he also wrote some fiction. He wrote that instead of writing it under his actual name, because that was where his political work was, and I'm not sure which was more lucrative at the time. But you may know him by his pen name that he wrote his fiction under, Lewis Carroll. Yes, this stuff that Mark Warner is leading towards with all this stuff about the misinformation and disinformation and election interference is all, based on the writings of the same mind that gave you Alice in Wonderland. That's right, Pyramid Paving. Use us or it's your own asphalt. Join Joe Thomas in the morning live at Gypsy Hill Park in Stanton on May 25th as we kick off the Memorial Day weekend to raise money for veterans' causes in the area. Vets for Vets. If you have a hot rod, you have a hot hatch, whatever it is you've got, then bring it down. It doesn't have to just be a Corvette. It can be Mopar, Mustang, Japanese, JDM, whatever it may be. You want to bring it and show it off. $10 admission. All of it goes to the veterans of the foreign wars. We'll be visiting with Robert Wright, who's the guy putting it together, a little bit later on this morning.
Your Friday forecast calls for a slight chance of a shower, maybe some scattered storms in the afternoon, otherwise partly sunny, highs around 80. Friday night, scattered showers and storms before midnight, a low of 63. On Saturday, scattered showers and storms in the afternoon, cooler, a high of 68. Saturday night, showers and storms before midnight, overnight lows around 58. By Sunday, showers likely early, otherwise mostly cloudy, and 66.
From BlueRidgeLife.com, I'm forecaster Tommy Stafford. Now back to Joe Thomas in the morning.
Favorite people from the Thomas Jefferson Institute. He is the great Steve Hayner. Steve, good to see you again this week. And how are you doing?
I'm doing fine, enjoying this sunshine. I haven't seen much of the sun lately.
Yeah, well, that's unfortunately been the case across Central Virginia, but our gardens are all appreciating it at least a little bit there, Steve. So the budget deal certainly caught up a lot of folks across the Commonwealth this week. Talk about the compromise that they came together with. First the conferees and then the governor managing to keep things like our regional greenhouse gas emissions initiative membership out of it. Is this, you've been around this a long time, is this at least harken back to the days when there was actually give and take amongst sides in the political scene in Virginia?
It was well, again, when you go back 30 days, 60 days, the rhetoric was really nasty, and there was a lot of poking back and forth on social media, and even senior Democrats were calling the governor a spoiled brat. I mean, it was just a really ugly tone.
Mm-hmm.
And that was not typical of the legislature when I came here 30, 35, 40 years ago. But suddenly, after the veto session, the governor put in a version of the budget with 240 amendments, but he did demonstrate that he could give the Democrats most of their spending without raising taxes. And I think they kind of took that message to heart. And they, the good news is they completely backed off their tax demands.
Mm-hmm.
They were holding up the whole process because they wanted to raise the digital sales tax and start taxing streaming services and digital transactions. And they wanted to reimpose that regional greenhouse gas tax on electricity.
Mm-hmm.
And the governor basically said, you can't have either one. I'm not signing a budget if you put in either one, but I can assign a budget that spends the money you want on education, mental health. So I think it kind of took the fire out of them, and they agreed to a compromise. And if you watch what happened Monday, I mean, it was amazing. I mean, the budget was discussed publicly for the first time like about Thursday.
Mm-hmm.
It was published on a website on Saturday, and on Monday they voted for it, and they passed a rule that said it can't be amended. It really can't even be debated. You got to vote for it or vote against it, but you can't try to change it.
Mm.
And before the sun had set, the governor had signed the actual bill, which doesn't happen very often. So it was definitely on a fast track.
Now, this is, I think, classically one of those instances where you hear about, we all love sausage, but we don't want to see it made. So, as we watched the process, the governor said, well, I want I want tax cuts, but I'll offset them with these, things like the digital sales tax.
Right.
And the Democrat leaders in the House said, no tax cuts, but we like this digital sales tax. And everyone said, oh, the governor blew it. Oh, why did he do that? But it seems like by doing this, he pulled them in towards his points regarding reining in some of the spending, or at least keeping it to what we can afford based on what we're already generating tax wise.
It would be nice to assume this was all planned, but in my experience, things are not that organized. I think that it's interesting because the problem with both sides on the tax issue is neither one of them, neither the governor nor the Democrats, really laid any groundwork for what they wanted to do. I mean, they basically just sort of threw in the bills at the last minute, and that's not how it works. I mean, if you want to do something as serious as tax changes in the Commonwealth, it takes some groundwork. It takes some talking to people. It takes building some consensus. It's interesting. The budget and I've been through that all the way back to the Jerry Bilal's transportation taxes in the 1980s. So I mean, it's a process. And neither the Democrats nor the governor really had gone through that process. So I think there's still a chance you'll see some continuation, some effort at that process. The Democrats put language in the budget insisting there be a study commission to continue to look at the digital sales tax. I'm all for that. I'm all for study commissions. Who can be against a study, right? But again, whether they actually meet it or do the hard work, we'll have to wait and see.
Faster than you can say car tax elimination. I was thinking back to that, or of course that's Governor Gilmore's was his plan, or Bob McDonnell's proposal to the Alcoholic Beverage Commission. And in both cases, one of the delegates told me this week, he said one of the things we did see was an awful lot of members of the House and Senate Democratic caucus using phrases like "our money." And he said, if the campaigns are run correctly, at least being able to, use the language of our money versus their money is important in the future anyway, as 2025 in our headline.
They think it's all their money. Well, even with the car tax thing, remember Governor Gilmore, he campaigned on the issue. And they did do some work trying to lay out what it would look like and what the ramifications were, and try to run the numbers. And so again, he had built up a running start on that before he brought it to the assembly. So again, that's the way it ought to be done. And again, on taxes, I'm not getting excited about anything, because here's the most important thing on Virginia taxes. First, we have to deal with the federal taxes. Everybody forgets, well, too many people forget, that federal tax rules that they passed in 2017, the Trump tax cuts, they all expire. I mean, they all had a short leash. So in 2025, 2026, they started expiring. So we got to see what Congress does first. Congress is going to have to deal with that. And the new president, whoever it is going to have to deal with that. And only then, really, after we see what the feds do, should Virginia start looking at a hard change in our taxes, because so much of what we do is tied to the federal law.
Well, and you bring up I think the most important point, because a lot of Virginia's budget, and it's grown over the years. I remember, I guess it was about 10 years ago.
That's huge.
Senator Deeds said that it was something like 20%. I think it's grown way beyond that amount of pass through in the Virginia budget in this $188 billion spending plan. So that's going to be key to it. But also the economic activity. I mean, you talk about the passive tax of inflation. The presumption that the government is going to spend this money better than the citizens has led us to this place where the consumer price index went up again. The producer price index went up even more. And of course, that isn't even considering gasoline or fuel, I guess, and food, which are two things that generally I don't think we can do a day without. So is there still the concern that we're going to be here in a year saying, the collections, the revenue, as they like to call it, projections just didn't meet our projections, so we're going to have to backfill in to keep the budget up?
Well, the truth is there are members of the General Assembly who say that every year. And they say it when the revenue goes up, and they say it when the revenue is flat, but they're going to say it anyway. So I tend to disregard a lot of that talk. I mean, we have a fairly stable economy in Virginia. It's not growing great. It's not going super, but again, by this time next year, it could be. I mean, I do think, again, the federal election could bring us a change in direction in the country. If we get a change in direction in the country, I think Virginia will greatly benefit from that. So you know, I'm not too worried about, again, there's no way to satisfy all the things people want to do with you know, there's some stuff in this budget that if people understood it, when they understand it, they're going to be furious. I mean, this is the first time I've seen the level of spending last couple of years where we're taking general fund money, tax money from income tax and sales tax, and spending it on highways. Well, we didn't used to do that in Virginia. And you know, there's a lot of money going to I-64 down towards Williamsburg, a lot of money going into I-81 in Western Virginia and the Valley. And those are all important projects, but again, they're using general fund money for that. There's also this huge new program, which is going to spread like topsy, of toll relief. And this was something Senator Lucas insisted on. That was her trading card for her constituents. She wanted to reduce the amount of money they pay because they have to cross, a lot of them have to cross those tunnels in Hampton Roads daily to go to work or to go to the doctor or go shopping. And they spend a lot of time and a lot of money on those tunnel tolls. So now there's this special low income program for toll relief, and they'll get passes and they'll pay, you know, well, you know, I don't see why they're any more important than the people in Northern Virginia who pay tolls, or the people in other places of the state who pay tolls.
Well,
so
and,
I think
that brings up that question of usage fees that has kind of chased the Department of Transportation in Virginia around for a very long time, Steve, is you know, because the privacy advocates will say, hang on a second here, I don't want somebody with a tracking device on my car. But then you've got people saying, well, if you drive in DC, you should pay higher taxes because of the congestion. They do it in Europe and that kind of thing. You know, so a mile is not equal, so you can't just do it on the odometer readings, and it becomes this whole brouhaha of other things around usage taxes versus, well, we should just all, as you said, use the general fund to build our roads and just dispense with this idea that we can pay for our roads separately from all of our other taxes, I think is what I've been hearing.
But again, you start using all the general fund to pay for your roads, and it's competing then suddenly with the police and the fire and it's the reality is government's expensive and it's getting more expensive. And if you open up your door to the public, they'll form a line saying, I need to have this, I need to have that, and everybody should pay for it. Don't make me pay for it. So well, it's the ongoing battle.
And your column, I think, is particularly poignant because it's titled at thomasjeffersoninst.org, Silence or Disinterest Will Get Your Netflix and NFL Sunday Ticket Taxed. And it's more not just about the digital sales tax, but the idea that these elections don't matter to me. The 20% turnout that some of these Senate and House races wind up generating. What has the reaction been to this piece?
Well, again, I think there has been an awakening on the part of enough voters that they were about to really make a major change in the sales tax. And again, Amazon, Netflix, any kind of Microsoft subscription, but even like if you pay use a digital program to do your annual tax bill, to do your, file your taxes, all those things were about to be sucked into the sales tax. And on the business side, it was even more dramatic because so many transactions in business now are digital. So many of the services are digital, and on the business side, it does what we call pyramiding. I mean, this supplier pays it, and then you buy it from him, and he has to pay the tax, and then some other supplier has to pay the tax. By the time it gets to the final consumer, the tax has been paid 3 or 4 times.
And most people are against value-added taxes.
Right, it basically becomes a value-added tax.
A giant.
And Virginia's not supposed to have a value-added tax. So if they want that, they should do that, but they need to make it explicit. So again, I think that's why this thing fell apart, because I think people were waking up to just what the impact would be. Now, again, I think something is coming in that regard because the economy is going more and more to the digital economy. So if you're going to have a sales tax, it makes sense to look at some of these transactions. But again, they had not thought it through. They had not done the numbers, and they had not looked at what I like to call the law of unintended consequences, and there were some very big unintended consequences with the version they had written and put into the budget, and the governor got rid of it. So to his credit, he knocked it out.
There was a piece written that posited the question, should we have a two-term governor because, these outsiders getting elected governor don't really have the ramp-up time. I don't know if that's the case. Bob McDonnell struggled for his first couple of years, and he had been involved for a long time there. I think sometimes we overstate the statesmanship of needing to, work with the General Assembly. Steve Hayner on with us from the Thomas Jefferson Institute. You find them online at thomasjeffersoninst.org. You were talking about the digital sales tax, and we have passed, the ability to collect taxes through online transactions. And I think a lot of Virginians, I think fairly would say, isn't that a digital sales tax? But this is more over on the use of a product. We're talking right now on Zoom.
Well, again,
don't tell anyone I'm using open source freeware to do the audio recording. But often you'll pay for a Cool Edit or Adobe Audition, and you pay for these things. But a lot of them are subscription cloud-based services. So it's hidden in the fact that you're not just buying this software anymore. So whether it be Intuit or QuickBooks or those other things, I think that's what you're talking about, this pyramid of the.
Well, again, Virginia is one of the states that there are only a few services Virginia taxes. So again, that's really what the expansion is. It's an expansion, not just goods, but into services. So if you buy a book in a bookstore, you pay tax. If you rent the book from Kindle, you weren't paying tax. Under this bill, you would have paid tax. Let me go back to your earlier discussion, though. I actually think we should have a two-term governor. I mean, I'm one of the people who thinks that we ought to. The General Assembly doesn't like it because, of course, it would strengthen the governor immensely in terms of the political struggles between the House, Senate, and the governor's office. But having worked in state government, having worked in one of those elected offices many years ago, I worked for Attorney General Mark Earley. You discover very quickly that you can call it the deep state, or you can just call it, the state employees, the bureaucracy. But they're doing a countdown in their heads the minute you show up, because they assume, well, 4 years and you're gone, 4 years and you're gone. I'll be here a lot longer than you. So
we see
the fact that a governor would,
we saw
the
that
governor
in the Department of Education. These, the education guidelines that the governor ran on. Most of these school boards said, yeah, we'll run out the clock on this guy, much in the way the vaunted Charlottesville Western bypass had the clock run out on Bob McDonnell. They said, well, we'll just, take the air out of the ball, play four-corner defense, and by the time, we exhaust all of our appeals, Terry McAuliffe was governor and the Western bypass was defunded.
I would happily see the Constitution amended to allow a governor. And of course, a governor can run for a second term. He has to sit out one.
Our friends at Vets for Vets are hoping you can join us at Gypsy Hill Park on May 25th, kicking off the Memorial Day weekend with a car show to benefit the VFW entry fees for whatever car you want to bring. I know it's called Vets for Vets, but all makes are welcome. And it begins at 10 o'clock Saturday, May 25th, kicking off the Memorial Day weekend at Gypsy Hill Park with me, Joe Thomas, in the morning, broadcasting live from there as well.
Your Friday forecast calls for a slight chance of a shower, maybe some scattered storms in the afternoon, otherwise partly sunny, highs around 80. Friday night, scattered showers and storms before midnight, a low of 63. On Saturday, scattered showers and storms in the afternoon, cooler, a high of 68. Saturday night, showers and storms before midnight, overnight lows around 58. By Sunday, showers likely early, otherwise mostly cloudy, and 66.
From BlueRidgeLife.com, I'm forecaster Tommy Stafford. Now, back to Joe Thomas in the morning.
back to the tax issue. Look, the reality is it's coming. We're gonna pay some level of digital tax. It's a question of how broad it is, and hopefully when they pass something, it'll be very narrow. And more importantly, hopefully when they pass it, they'll do what the governor did, which is create this new sales tax and impose that on people, but at the same time, give people an income tax cut or find some other way to give a tax cut so that the net impact is pretty low. And that's what I would like to see happen. If they do it, is I want to see them index the tax code so it no longer, inflation no longer creates an automatic, bonus for the state. And I'd like to see, some more reductions in this, increases in this, some other things that basically lower the income tax impact on middle class folks, because the income tax hits people pretty hard.
Well, and is the danger in this, I can hear the campaigns now that a sales tax, and I remember we went through this, remember the glory days of the fair tax movement, Steve Gaynor, that people said, well, that's a regressive tax because poor people are going to pay the same taxes that rich people do. And it was often some of the same arguments, is that everyone would have some buy-in. If you bought this product, you're going to pay sales tax on it, therefore you're contributing just like everyone else. And the demagoguery often is, now that we have more and more people living under what is considered the poverty level in Virginia, that I can hear the campaigners going out there and mailing flyers that say so-and-so is going to, increase the cost of your insert, all the things that, the sales would hit.
That's what they did to the governor this year. I mean, he had an income tax proposal and they immediately attacked it because, Virginia is just like the federal government. The vast majority of their income tax dollars are actually coming from upper middle class and upper class people. Sure. I mean, you got to have income to pay income tax. If your income is only $25,000, $30,000, you still pay some, but you don't pay much. And I mean, I think you can deal with that debate. And Virginia, frankly, has kind of a flat tax, because once you get to $17,000, which is a pretty low level, you're paying the same amount as the millionaire. The 17,000 level and the $1 million level are exactly the same, 5.75%. So, I think everything you try to sell, the key is education. The key is to find a way to get people to understand it. And again, that's going back to my earlier point. If you're going to make a major change in the tax code, it takes months and months and months of talking about it and telling people about it to make sure they understand what you're doing. And that's why it's hard to drop in a bill in December and expect it to pass in January.
Unfortunately, talking to the people you need to talk to often means talking to people who aren't in your same political party. And funny how those conversations always wind up in somebody's blog or somebody's newspaper.
Well, it's one of my key points for years has been this business about indexing the tax code for inflation. Well, another member of the General Assembly who agrees with me on that 100% is currently the Democratic chairman of the House Finance Committee, Vivian Watts from Fairfax. I mean, there are a number of folks who get the indexing issue on both sides of the aisle. So I mean, there's some common ground, and I'm common ground with them. I mean, I'm not anti-income tax. I've never been one saying we should eliminate the income tax entirely. There are people out there who would love to do that. And that's fine, but then how are you going to pay for everything?
State's still going to need a budget.
So that means your sales tax is going to 10%. So again, I think there's room for compromise, and the first step is to cool it, to get off Twitter, and to get in the room and have an adult conversation.
Well, and that was brought up. There was a speech made at the Republican Party State Central Committee meeting about, scorched earth kind of campaigning and becoming intransigent with one another, and you're either for me or you're against me, kind of politicking that leaves us no choice but to sit there and sit. Is that Louise Lucas actually sitting next to Governor Youngkin? Is it speak to
that was quite a visual. I was pretty stunned when I saw that picture. I thought that was really something. Again, I'm feeling the years, but this was session number 40 for me, and I've seen a lot in 40 years of watching the General Assembly. 40 years ago, it was a very different. Of course, 40 years ago, the Democrats had total control of both chambers, and the Republicans were the ones who were kind of being left out a lot. But over the years, I've seen Republican control, Democratic control. There've been also years when it's been very, very close, or even In the Senate, it was 2020. I mean, it was actually 2020 in the Senate. So they were forced to work together, and it worked out well. So it can be done.
It does the two-term governor, and I'm just fascinated. This thought struck me though. I'm watching Governor Youngkin and Senator Lucas kind of shepherd their flocks towards this deal on the budget. If he's running for re-election, does that happen? Because then it's, oh, we got to beat him because he's going to be running against Congresswoman Spanberger, and we've got to score points for her. I mean, it becomes this whole like team golf. Well, I didn't get the birdie, but I helped my other teammates get some points.
Well, it to some extent that's the case, but I'm not sure that's unhealthy.
Okay.
I mean, I think there's again, the fact that there are election consequences on both sides, it gets to be a focus on both sides. And I think the voters actually do reward cooperation on things that need to be, where you need to see cooperation. And again, Spanberger is interesting you brought up her name, because I suspect behind the scenes, I can't prove it, but I suspect behind the scenes, she was encouraging them to cool the rhetoric and make a budget deal, because she saw the downside. If 6 weeks from now, the state shut down, we didn't have a state budget, and the Democrats got blamed. Well, she wouldn't want that. She's running for governor. If the Democrats got blamed for shutting down state government because they wanted to raise taxes, then that might have a consequence on her campaign. Again, like I said, the main reason I think the main point of the two-term governor is the governors never get a chance to finish anything. They can just start something and they don't get to see it through. Right there in Charlottesville, UVA, the governor, as of July of this year, will finally have made a majority board appointments to the UVA Board of Visitors. So for another 18 months, then it'll be his board of visitors at UVA. At least he'll have a majority control of his appointees, and then he leaves. And then suddenly his appointees are proving to be sometimes a break or an impediment on what the next governor wants to do.
Right.
So again, I think a governor deserves at least the 8-year. And again, the voters can always reject that person.
Right.
I mean, you run for a second term, you might lose.
And I want to bring it back to your column, because you're talking about being engaged, being those things. Local news important to me. My wife and I just purchased a radio station that was just regurgitating ESPN sports for the last 10 years. So we're trying to bring more local news coverage to Stanton and Waynesboro and the Valley, and it has to be there, because that, I think, drives this apathy towards these local elections, these state senate and these house elections, because you don't see it, you don't hear it. You hear Trump and Biden on the radio and in the TV. Steve, is that also something that we really need to foment in the world? And especially with the digital technology, the ability to get.
I love local radio. I've always loved local radio. That's what I really should have done with.
We'll give you a show. You available daily at 3 or
WTON? Is that what you purchased?
Yes,
I remember WTON. I lived in Lexington for years. I covered the Valley for the Roanoke Times 40 years ago.
All the more reason, ladies and gentlemen, he's hired.
Yeah, well, I would coming back to the Valley would make me very happy. We love that part of the state. We had a house at Wintergreen for 10 years. It is sad to see what's going on with local media. It's sad to see what's going on with the medium-sized papers, the Richmond paper, the Roanoke paper, even the Washington Post.
Right.
When I was at the Roanoke Times and came to Richmond 40 years ago, I was one of 2 Roanoke reporters. There were 3 or 4 Norfolk reporters. There were 3 or 4 folks from the Washington Post. The radio stations, there were several radio stations. There were several, Joe DeShiel from Channel 7 in Roanoke was there every day. It was a huge crew covering the General Assembly, a lot of competition, a lot of scoops, it was a lot of fun. And it was good for the folks back home, because they were getting a report on what the heck was going on. And stuff happens down there that nobody covers.
Right.
I mean, that's one reason I still write for Bacon's Rebellion, is because I see things and I hear things that not getting covered at all. And, Bacon's Rebellion might only have a few of the readers out there, but at least it gets some record, and at least it exists now on the internet for someone to look up 10 years later that this happened. I mean, it's just pathetic what's going on. And I'm not sure what we do to fix it, because I don't like the idea of government funding.
Oh, no,
And
no,
I
no.
don't really like the idea of these nonprofit special interest groups, because they're basically dictating content.
Right, it's PR,
I mean,
really,
I don't
for the
trust,
news,
you know,
yeah.
Virginia Mercury or these guys, because they've got big liberal money behind them dictating content. So it's but again, the local government, I mean, the local economies need to support these stations. So go for it, man. I hope all the grocery stores, all the restaurants, everybody buys ads and keeps your station going.
But most importantly, it's so that we stay involved in the Board of Supervisors races, school
Right.
board and all these things, because all this filters down. I mean, it's one thing to say Glenn Youngkin versus Louise Lucas, but there's 39 other senators along with Senator Lucas, and so you have to have your voices in those places, Steve. And that's why
That's right. And most dangerous job in America, in Virginia politics, is to be on some poor board of supervisors, because they're always voting on very controversial stuff.
Yeah.
And whatever you do, half the people in the room are going to go away mad.
Mhm.
You know, raise taxes, don't raise taxes, do the rezoning, don't do the rezoning.
Yep.
They're going to go away mad if you're not careful.
Let my business open, that kind of thing, and all those
Right,
things.
exactly. Yeah, this whole business of these skill games. I mean,
Oh gosh, what a mess that was.
that's, you know, if they set that up so that people needed a special use permit, can you imagine what a mess that would be? So
Oh yeah.
all the people getting the special use permits.
But
So,
I mean,
you know,
talk about a mishandling. I mean, Steve, like I said, you said this is your 40th General Assembly, so you've seen a few of these horse races. But I remember when this first began, and Hermie Sadler was calling me, and his family certainly big in the truck stop business and all, and I have to confess, I didn't see it coming when all of a sudden they turn around and said, "Hey, we'll let you have those skill games if they come through the Virginia government first." And I'm like, "Oh, that was the problem. It was they were cutting into the Virginia lottery money, and
exactly.
now once we have it under there, we'll let you have it back." And now
Well, and
we'll
all the opposition this year came from the casinos,
right.
because
Yep.
the casinos see them as competition, and rightly so.
Mm-hmm.
So the
now
casinos want you to get in your car and drive to Stanton, or drive to Chesapeake, or Portsmouth, or or to a Rosie's Emporium in Richmond.
we'll see how that goes. There's our economic development plan. Get everyone to start gambling, and then we'll take our cut. It's like a
Again, I having been down there, I was there when they passed the lottery. I was there when Billy O'Brien from Virginia Beach, was the big patron of the library, and of course they passed it with a referendum, which made it easier to sell, and people got a chance to vote. But it was going to be this great panacea. We'd never have another tax increase, and the schools would be blessed with all this money, and it never kind of lives up to its hype.
Never.
But it certainly has sucked a lot of money out of people's pockets.
Never.
I call it the tax on the mathematically challenged.
Yes, it is. And maybe they wouldn't notice anyway. Steve Haintner from the Thomas Jefferson Institute. Find his column, thomasjeffersoninst.org. Steve, you have a wonderful weekend, and let me know when you can start in our newsroom in Stanton, okay?
That's it's tempting. I'll think about it.
Paving. Our friends at the Vets for Vets car show want you to join us at Gypsy Hill Park on Saturday morning, May 25th, kicking off the Memorial Day weekend, raising money for vets charities in the Shenandoah Valley with a great car show. It's going to be huge at Gypsy Hill Park in the stadium parking lot. They're starting at 10 a.m. Live broadcast from me, but other things include music, food, and some great cars. If you have one you want to show, you can bring it to $10 admission fee goes to the VFW.
Your Friday forecast calls for a slight chance of a shower, maybe some scattered storms in the afternoon, otherwise partly sunny, highs around 80. Friday night, scattered showers and storms before midnight, a low of 63. On Saturday, scattered showers and storms in the afternoon, cooler, a high of 68. Saturday night, showers and storms before midnight, overnight lows around 58. By Sunday, showers likely early, otherwise mostly cloudy, and 66.
From BlueRidgeLife.com, I'm forecaster Tommy Stafford. Now back to Joe Thomas in the morning.
Joe Thomas in the morning. Thank you for letting us do what we do with you here on YouTube and Rumble. Coming soon back to the old Tesla-style electricity transmitted through the air and decoded in your dashboard or on your desktop there, both amplitude and frequency modulation goodness. I want to give some love to our friends at the Albemarle Charlottesville Historical Society for some hard work they've done there, but we have folks on the line as well. Good morning. You're on the air with Joe Thomas in the morning. Who is this? Let me see if do this. Good morning. You're on the air with Joe Thomas in the morning. Who's this? Where did the phone lines go there? Hang on a second here. It's you're connected and connected. Good morning. You're on the air with Joe Thomas in the morning. Who's this? Let's try this. Okay. Let's try it this way. And let's see if that reconnects it there. Good morning. You're on the air with Joe Thomas in the morning. Who's this? Seems like they should be there, and we should be hearing them. Good morning. Who's this? Let's see if we can't reconnect somewhere along the lines there. There may be a line crossed in there, and then we'll see if we can't... we'll get it this time around. Good morning. You're on the air with Joe Thomas in the morning. This time, who's this? Hello? I heard something there. That time there was definitely somebody on the line in there. I just heard some pixelated audio from somewhere in the Ethereum there. Good morning. You're on the air with Joe Thomas in the morning. Who's this?
Joe.
Okay, I heard him that time, so can we go back and get him in here into the system? So this is why you some of these electronic connections you worry about. Hi, who's this? I'm not hearing anything from them there. Let me just do that and. Yeah, it's not there. All right. So while you reconnect in here, and we'll try to get to you again. It's live phone calls, and we did them yesterday. We had no problem with them at all, and we did a couple of things to the studio here to augment the process here. Let me see again about getting you in here on the air. Good morning. Who's this? It is befuddling to me as to where they might be in here. In test 1, 2. Everything seems to be telling me that we should be hearing the phone call here, and they're probably hearing me, and somehow they're not getting in here. So we're going to... Yep, they're definitely not coming through on the line here. Let's see if we can do a volume thing. Maybe it was volume. It's simple. Check the power. Good morning. Who's this? No. All right. We're going to have to move on from that and figure it out in this. We do have a package here. Our friends at the Charlottesville Albemarle Historical Society did a great bit of work, and I want to give them some credit for it. The story itself can be a little because there's a a situation regarding enslaved cemeteries, and immediately people start to say, I know where this is going. But first I want to talk about the work that Tom Chapman and the folks at the Albemarle Charlottesville Historical Society did on this story here.
We first told you about the discovery of dozens of unmarked graves at Penn Park back in 2022. Now the history of those enslaved and buried there is being uncovered by those it means the most to. Maggie Glass shares how.
They used to come here as a child and play on the playground.
Lorenzo Dickerson is no stranger to Penn Park, or at least the version most of us know, a place to walk, play sports, or golf. What he was unaware of was this part of Penn Park and what lies behind these ropes and just under the surface.
I had never been on this side of the park, had never seen the grave sites or knew anything about the history of this area.
Inside these gates lie the relatives of the Gilmers, Cravens, and Hotops, families who owned the land in the 18th and 19th centuries. But it's what's just outside of these walls we now know are more than 40 unmarked graves, hidden from view, identities lost to time.
It's a stark visual representation of the time that folks lived in and how they were treated, being separated and segregated both in life as well as in death.
It's history Lorenzo Dickerson never imagined he was a part of.
My sixth great-grandfather, Wilson Dickerson, whom would have been here at Penn Park. I assumed that I knew everything about my family historically.
Lorenzo is not alone. It turns out he's not the only Dickerson descendant living in Charlottesville.
I grew up in the 10th and Page neighborhood.
Diane Brown Towns is related to Elizabeth Dickerson Brown, the sister of Wilson Dickerson.
It means a lot to me to have Lorenzo here because it's affirmation that we are undoing the damage that was done.
Lorenzo, Diane, and other descendants discovering their family history has been a long journey. To understand how we got to where we are now, we first have to turn the clock back 4 years before any of this was marked off.
The summer of 2020, we did a ground-penetrating radar examination of the site.
Jeff Werner, Charlottesville's historic preservation and design planner, says that was the first big step in determining what they were dealing with.
We saw that 8 to 10 depressions, and the result of that suggests in excess of 40 possible burials.
A team of historians then set off to answer the glaring question, who is buried there?
Experience of segregation, of Jim Crow, of other aspects of where our history has been, have made it that it's been a segregated history.
After years of combing through old censuses, tax records, family Bibles, and other documents, slowly but surely, the past reached out to the present.
And it opens up an entire history of this place, of this locality that has never been told.
Tom Chapman, executive director of the Albemarle Charlottesville Historical Society, says the work sheds light on the deeper roots of the city.
Unless we understand a whole history, then how can we look at ourselves as a whole community?
So obviously the controversial bit is where people start to feel like, oh, you're just trying to get us to accept, the premise that there's reclaimed history, and there is no reclaimed history, and I'll be the first one to tell you that. You don't reclaim history, you discover history, you can read history, you can study history. You can't reclaim it. It is or it isn't, and that's where the narration begins, and certainly I think the ground has been covered in the conditions that people lived under and the mistakes that were made. But the idea that you can reclaim history that was, in the implications of the way it's said regarding whether or not it was done with untoward purpose, whether it was done with intent to conceal and somehow obfuscate the history that's there, it is offensive, I think, to people who are actually historians as well, who look at things like this and say, I'm sorry, history is history. and you should be able to accept the history being, what it is as what it is. And when you start to play the games with the history, that's how you wind up with monuments to war heroes being taken down, or just soldiers in general because you didn't like the war. So you're going to reclaim the history and then tell everyone that that didn't happen. That's what Orwell was warning us about.
Friday forecast calls for a slight chance of a shower, maybe some scattered storms in the afternoon, otherwise partly sunny, highs around 80. Friday night, scattered showers and storms before midnight, a low of 63. On Saturday, scattered showers and storms in the afternoon, cooler, a high of 68. Saturday night, showers and storms before midnight, overnight lows around 58. By Sunday, showers likely early, otherwise mostly cloudy, and 66.
From BlueRidgeLife.com, I'm forecaster Tommy Stafford. Now, back to Joe Thomas in the morning.
Joe Thomas in the morning. Time to open Mac McDonald's reporter's notebook for this Friday morning. A lot of golf, a lot of, and some of it being played by professionals. How you doing, Brother Mac?
You are not going to believe what's just happened outside the gates of Valhalla.
You mean hold it?
And I'll give you the details in a minute.
Hold on a second. Do you mean the Valhalla, the Norse heaven, or do you mean the golf course?
No. The
okay.
Where the PGA
okay, all right. Just making sure.
Being played. World number one, Scotty Scheffler, handcuffed, put in the back of a car.
What?
For trying to get around and drive on the median. A pedestrian was hit and killed by a bus.
Oh, my God.
So Scotty, there was a backup. His tee time is 8:48. And he tried to go around, and a cop attached himself to his car. Scotty stopped. He banged on the hood, got him out. They handcuffed him. They took him to jail.
Oh, my God.
I'll give you more details here in just a second.
Now, for the PGA fans, is that a drop or is that, a two-stroke penalty? Or
Only you.
Yeah, well.
Only you.
It's my role.
Only you now. Try to. Is that a drop? Yeah. He's got to play the hole over. It's like, stroke and distance, when you're out.
All right, now we've
when
taken
you're out
this
of
to a
bounds.
whole different level,
Yeah.
and people are thinking we're certainly the death of the pedestrian is tragic and horrible. But
Jeff Darlington, who's an analyst for ESPN, golf analyst, Scotty turns to him. He's trying to walk in. Scotty turns to him and goes, "Please help me." And so Jeff Darlington tried to tell the cop, "Go look, this is Scotty Scheffler." He didn't know it was Scheffler. He goes, "You step back or you're next."
Oh my God.
I mean, it's a melee. Okay, all right. Pitching and the long ball propelled number 18 Virginia in game 1 of the Virginia Tech series last night. Eric Becker, a 2-out 2-run blast off the Disharoon scoreboard. And starting left-hander Evan Blanco did not allow a run through 7 1/3. Rare in college baseball. The final was 7-3 last night at the Dish. The Massachusetts second year retired 10 of his last 12. He did not allow a runner to reach second in his last 3 1/3. 5 of the Cavs' 7 runs were dingers. Jacob Ferentz, Harrison Didowick also homered. And for Wick, his 20th homer of the year. It came in the 5th, and he becomes the 3rd player in program history to go yard 20 times in a single season. Not bad, huh?
Man.
Skipper Brian O'Connor with plenty of praise, though, for his pitcher and left-hander, Evan Blanco.
Evan Blanco was outstanding tonight. His best start that he's ever had in our uniform. Just the multiple times that he buckled down and made big pitches. And that's what leaders do, and he stepped up at the biggest moment for us. And to pitch into the 8th inning in today's day and age in college baseball is pretty rare. And he just was in complete command of the game.
By the way, game 2 will be at noon today because I guess you guys have weather coming in this afternoon. And by the way, I want to thank the UVA Sports Information Office and all their PR people, because through the whole year we've had Brian O'Connor every postgame. And now sometimes there's a lawnmower like right next to him.
Well, grass got to get cut.
They have had him postgame almost every game. I think every game.
Yeah.
So I just want to thank, because they've allowed better coverage of UVA baseball. And that, and especially from somebody sitting in Florida who wants to tell the story, I just want to say thank you. Okay. Maybe we don't thank them enough. All right. So somebody wants to say thank you to the Timberwolves. 115-70 was the final last night in the Denver game. 45 points. Okay. Game 6, Western semifinals. Anthony Edwards at 27. The Wolves led 31-14 after the first quarter. They had a 20-0 run. Then they had a 24-0 run in the fourth quarter.
Holy cow. Jeez.
Denver was outscored in the fourth 29-9. Game set match. Game 7 will be Sunday. All right.
Wow.
So Yankees pitcher Clark Smith's father is a Delta pilot, all right, and has flown the team on certain charters. Well, last night, Clark Smith captained his team to a 5-0 win over Tampa. I looked and looked for how to write that sentence, throwing 8 shutout innings. Anyway, Mets beat the Phillies in 11-6-5. I went a long way to get it. New York avoids the 4-game sweep in Philly. I'll be instructing my class that, their instructor sometimes just doesn't have a clue. All right.
Do what I say, not what I do.
Xander Schauffele knows the golf gods will not let you win a PGA event on Thursday, especially a major. But no, you can lose it, all right? Schaff shot a bogey-free 62, tied for the lowest round score in a major.
Wow.
9 under. As of this morning, the Schauffele 62 is just a minor story. So with the golf interview, at least Schauffele with a little flavor now. Well, I hit a 6-iron on 9, and then I double bogey. Anyway, instead of a boring interview, Schauffele let us into his soul saying, I'm learning a lot about myself. Listen.
I'm learning about myself. People always say, put yourself in that situation. And I've been putting myself in the situation to try and compete at a really high level. And I try and learn sort of what I do right and what I do wrong. So I feel like I've become more comfortable playing in big events. I haven't gotten it done in quite some time, but I think I'm pretty happy with where things are.
Yeah, 11 players, 5 under or better. Tigers went over, may miss the cut. McIlroy played well, and I would like to point out that that's not the only golf story. My wife went with me yesterday to play 9 holes late yesterday afternoon, since our house is just torn up. We have no kitchen, and I taught her, because I said, "Hey, babe, will you grab my 8-iron?" And she goes, how do I know it's an 8-iron? I said, look at the bottom. And so she turned it over and she goes, oh. So she's learning. She's learning to caddy, and she also recognizes, is now a good time to open the beer? Yes. So the caddy's doing it. She was doing a great job.
If you have to ask, the answer is yes.
Well, it was 85. It was hot yesterday. All right.
Wow.
World number one Scotty Scheffler has been handcuffed and detained by police outside the gates of Valhalla. This is our breaking story. Now I'm going back. He tried to drive past a police officer on a median, following a pedestrian being hit and killed by a bus right outside the gates of Valhalla. An officer attempted to attach himself to Scheffler's car. Scotty stopped. The officer screamed at him, told him to get out of the car. He was handcuffed, arrested, and taken away. Now, while the car was sitting there, the police car with Scheffler in the back, Scheffler could not use his phone, could not call PGA officials. So he asked if they'd take the cuffs off. They uncuffed his hands and cuffed him again to make him more comfortable.
Wow.
His tee time was 8:48, or is this morning. However, now, and then the other part of that, Jeff Darlington, who's the ESPN golf analyst, was there walking in, because the media parking is probably a little different. Scheffler turned to him and said, Jeff, please help me. So Darlington went up to the police and said, Sir, this is one of the participants. You shut up. You stop, or you're going to be arrested.
Gee.
And so a guy gets hit by a bus and gets killed at 5 o'clock this morning.
I mean, that's tragic. I mean, that's...
And it was 5 lanes of gridlock of traffic. Okay. So now, the PGA officials have delayed things and said, well, we're not going to tee off for another hour. Okay, I think the first tee time was at 7:15 this morning. Now they're going to wait because I guess they're going to wait to see what happens and they're trying to protect Scheffler. They had no idea, the PGA officials had no idea this was going on.
Well,
this is the most bizarre thing I've ever seen.
Yeah, obviously a crisis situation and crisis management, people get paid big money to make sure these things. But, at some point, there was like, hey, we've got an event going on here. Somebody should let the organizers know that there's going to be a problem. It's interesting because and I guess maybe by we, I mean I'm just assume that the participants in these sporting events have a special entrance that they could use, and it's interesting to me to see how that the same things that would catch a regular attendee of the PGA at Valhalla would catch one of the participants as well. It's interesting that they don't have a back way in or something like that, something secured just for the participants.
No, Joe, great point. Great point. And normally, see, all the players get courtesy cars, right? And normally there's a magnet on the door that says PGA Championship courtesy car. I don't know if there was. Okay. But so Scheffler was trying to get in saying, okay, I'm just going to avoid the traffic. So he tried to go around where the police had things and traffic stopped and had it barricaded. So he was just trying to slip into the player's entrance there, which there was a gate, and this officer said, and I'm watching it right now, and Scheffler's in shorts, a polo, sneakers, white socks, so all his clothes are at the club, and they're handcuffed. They're putting him in the back of a Dodge Charger. The lights are all flashing and everything, and it's a uniform anyway.
I feel bad. I mean,
bizarro story for round two.
Do we know anything in and amongst all this? And I don't mean to put you on the spot, but do we know? To me, the question is, what happened to this pedestrian? I mean, was 5 a.m. It's gloaming. I mean,
just tried to who knows whether the bus swerved a little bit or whether he stepped out on the road. The bus didn't see him because it was foggy. It looked like there was some rain this morning.
Oh boy!
Kind of at 5 a.m. and the guy got killed.
Oh my gosh! That's
so.
I mean, to me, that's the story of what happens. after the fact. And certainly this brouhaha over Scheffler reminds me a little bit of when Tug McGraw's kid, who plays a little country music, I understand, got arrested in Buffalo, New York, for stealing a sheriff's horse after a show, and they insisted that.
What a mind trap you have!
Well, I lived through that summer of discontent. I thought that was my worst summer of discontent until I came to Charlottesville. But they brought him and his wife, Faith something or another, back to stand
Faith
trial.
Something or another?
Yeah, I forget. I'm not so much into country music.
Faith Hill.
Yeah, I know.
I
but
know.
But they brought them back for this huge celebrity trial because he got at the end of the show. They, I don't know if it was. I think "Save a Horse, Ride a Cowboy" is not.
Right,
that's a Big and Rich song. But they did something or other, and they rode off on these two sheriff's horses, and everyone made a huge deal about it. And they had the district attorney dragged them back into Buffalo in the midst of a tour, so they had to suspend the tour for a 2-week-long trial. There was testimony. I mean, I'd like to say it's laughable. We had some fun with it on the air. We interviewed the horse through his mouthpiece. The horse's mouthpiece came on with us, his attorney, and spoke out. Because it's always the victimless crimes there.
And you did that because the horse was the main story.
Well,
so that's
you'd think. I mean, he was the one that was violated. So anyway, but I hope the family is got support around them and something. Tommy writes in, having been a cop, I can tell you this was an overreaction by that police officer. Sure, the player should have probably been better in explaining, but once he did, the police officer should have stood down. James likes the quote. Did you only you? What a mind trap you have, Mac McDonald. James liked that line there, watching us online through YouTube as well this morning.
Which line?
Only you. What a mind trap you have. I don't remember everything. Just most of the stuff that happened to me.
But I
remember.
also said your tug grip, which went right over your head, which is okay because you got a lot going on. I said the horse story was probably your main story of the day.
Oh, it dominated us for a week because we were
your main story.
Yeah, I got it.
Okay.
It's a flick of a trail.
Let me write this down.
Where's the police officer to get him out of here?
Never do horse joke with Joe.
You're a funny man. That's but I appreciate it, Mac, and
you got big news next week, right? Big news.
Yeah, well, we're getting close. The countdown is on, and so we're going to a lot to do, a lot to get to, a lot of ducks to put in the row. So I appreciate
and by the way,
your
Knicks
participation.
Tonight, Rangers are in. Rangers move on.
Oh, good.
And the Knicks could move on tonight too. So the Big Apple will be celebrating.
Rocking
and the
there,
Yankees are playing well. So anyway, I'm going to follow now the story because we're going to find out what's going to happen. But I hope you have a terrific weekend.
You do the
I'll see you
same,
Monday.
and I hope the family, gets some peace, and maybe the PGA can help them out there, and we find out what happened there. And it's a 2-stroke penalty. Somebody just texted me to, being arrested is a 2-stroke penalty according to PGA rules.
Yeah,
so I don't know what that means, but you have a great weekend, Mac.
All right, see you, Joe.
a moment. Clark? What is wrong with this connection? Our friends at the Vets for Vets charity car show coming up May 25th, live broadcast by me. That was kind of what Mac was alluding to there at Gypsy Hill Park in Stanton. It is going to be Saturday morning, May 25th. You get there early and you can enter your car into the car show. There's some cash prizes. There is dashboard plaques for all the participating, or I guess the first 200 participating cars. We'll be there broadcasting live as well from all the festivities, raising money for veterans charities at the Vets for Vets car show coming up to kick off Memorial Day weekend, May 25th.
Your Friday forecast calls for a slight chance of a shower, maybe some scattered storms in the afternoon, otherwise partly sunny, highs around 80. Friday night, scattered showers and storms before midnight, a low of 63. On Saturday, scattered showers and storms in the afternoon, cooler, a high of 68. Saturday night, showers and storms before midnight, overnight lows around 58. By Sunday, showers likely early, otherwise mostly cloudy, and 66.
From BlueRidgeLife.com, I'm forecaster Tommy Stafford. Now back to Joe Thomas in the morning.
Joe Thomas in the morning, and thank you for letting us be of service to you as we get together on this Friday morning. We don't know what's going on with the phone system there. We've found that we can hear just a little bit, like way off in the distance, so the audio is not airable. So we appreciate folks who have been trying to call in at 434-882-4217. We're dogged in our persistence. We will keep trying to get it working again. Congressman Bob Good is joining us as well in a little while to talk about some of the things going on and go back to this story embroiling them. I think we've got the story out of New York where it seemed like both candidates in the congressional race were both there to be seen in the Trump proceedings there, and it seemed like the House Freedom Caucus had an organized event there. We'll get into that with the congressman, plus some of the things of substance that are going on. But I want to jump to this story because I think this is a notable story. Just yesterday, a testimony given by the head of the National Institute of Health, testimony given back in February, both confirmed that yet another conspiracy theory bites the dust, and the very thing that we truly crippled our entire society on was bovine excrement. It is made up, and it is worth about the paper that it is printed on there. And it's amazing. This testimony was only released yesterday. It was given by Dr. Francis Collins in February, talking about how this idea of wearing masks is he doesn't know where it came from there, and that the lab leak is a conspiracy theory there, and that wearing masks and 6 foot social distancing, he didn't know where it came from. Not an important thing. It was only what they used as the premise to completely undo our society in every instance there. So we're going to try this again because we are persistent folk here. Good morning. You're on the air with Joe Thomas in the morning. Who's this? All right, we're going to do it this way just for the sake of argument because I want to hear what's going on there. Good morning. Who's this?
Hello, Joe.
How you doing? Who's this?
Hey, it's Clark.
How you doing, sir? So what's on your mind?
Couple things. One, if keeping information from people is election interference,
Mm-hmm.
when is the FBI going to go on trial for suppressing the Hunter Biden laptop? And when are we going to see trials of the 51 former Intel officials that signed the letter stating that laptop was, Russian disinformation?
Well, you bring up the very important point, because if what this Plecker guy at the National Enquirer, because as the court seems to presume, we all believed that the National Enquirer was our go-to source for news about Donald Trump and Bat Boy. But beyond that is the premise that if you knew about this deal with Stormy Daniels, it would have changed your mind faster than you can say a basket of deplorables. But you mentioned things left unsaid in an election. If that's the case, we're going to arrest a whole lot of people. Never mind, the golfers that are getting arrested this morning, because everyone keeps things, and plays the stories to their own benefit. Did John McGuire support Bob Good? Yes. Did he change that? Yes. Is he allowed to change that? Yes, but he's pretending. Or did Bob Good say he thought that DeSantis was more electable than Trump and wanted 8 years? Yes, and asked and answered all these questions on the air. So is telling your story your way election interference? Because that's the dangerous place that I think Mark Warner was taking us down when he made that statement the other day. Dr. Clark, do you agree?
I think you're right. Now, we did briefly speak about the proposed presidential debates, Joe.
Yeah.
Do you remember in Rocky III when Mick was adamant that Rocky not fight Clubber Lang because he would, quote unquote, murder him to death?
Yes, I recall that, yes.
Okay, I can see Joe Biden being delusional enough to think he could debate Donald Trump. But I can't understand why his handlers want to put him in a debate with Donald Trump. Joe Biden has a hard time with softball interviews with friendly reporters. The fact of the matter is if you got him in an oratory contest with his shrinkflation ally, the Cookie Monster, me no like shrinkflation, Joe would have a hard time keeping up with him. Why do they want to put him in a contest with Donald Trump? Do they think they can, with no audience, deep fake and edit things? Do they think they can set the debates up and Donald Trump won't be able to appear?
Here's why they want it.
Do they want Joe Biden to do so badly that nobody objects when they replace him at the convention?
See, now that's a better conspiracy theory. See, and we've had a dearth of conspiracy theories ever since all these COVID ones have started to fall by the wayside, Dr. Clark. So thank you for contributing that one there. Maybe that's the case. Maybe they want it to be because the Democratic Party convention's not until August. So there could be quite a bit of time of saying, oh, gosh, this can't happen. Get Gavin Newsom on the set. Who's our stunt double? But I think the bigger point is a much more, pardon the phrase, mundane one, Dr. Clark, is that Joe Biden's behind. If you go to 270 to win, and you go just by the polling data, not what you think or feel, and if it's within 0.2 of a percentage point, I just give them to Biden. Donald Trump has 312 electoral votes right now, including all the electoral votes from Michigan, Georgia, Arizona, Nevada, all these swing states that might flip it. So, never minding the fact that he's running almost neck and neck in Virginia. So that's I think more why Joe Biden has decided to debate, because it's often, at least the last 5 years, been the purview of the person who's trying to catch up to demand these kind of debates. But I've got to run to a break, sir. I'm glad we got you on the air. We still got to figure out what's wrong with the phone system, but it's a new phone system, so we'll figure it out at some point. Thank you, sir.
Take care. It'll get worked out.
Friday forecast calls for a slight chance of a shower, maybe some scattered storms in the afternoon, otherwise partly sunny, highs around 80. Friday night, scattered showers and storms before midnight, a low of 63. On Saturday, scattered showers and storms in the afternoon, cooler, a high of 68. Saturday night, showers and storms before midnight, overnight lows around 58. By Sunday, showers likely early, otherwise mostly cloudy, and 66.
From BlueRidgeLife.com, I'm forecaster Tommy Stafford. Now back to Joe Thomas in the morning.
Joe Thomas in the morning. Thank you for joining in, letting us do what we do here. And I want to thank you all for joining in and taking some time out with us here on Rumble and YouTube. And joining us now from his 5th District office in Virginia, back from my old hometown, he is Congressman Bob Good. Bob, how did you enjoy your visit to New York?
It was terrific. You know, every Republican should be, I think almost everyone is, standing behind President Trump. And we went up there to try to say what he is not permitted to say. It's incredible, not only this just travesty of justice, or this miscarriage of justice or injustice, whatever you want to call it, with all these court cases that were launched, these charges against him, these prosecutions, as soon as he announced his presidency or his campaign for the presidency again. But then to have this judge in New York there in Manhattan who has put this gag order on the president to prevent him from being able to openly talk about the trial, to openly defend himself, for fear of literally being put in jail and put under contempt of court. He's been fined already for speaking out courageously and bravely in his own defense. So, and this judge who somehow seems to get all of the high-profile conservative cases, he gets to try those, it seems. But this judge's daughter is known to be a major fundraiser for the Democrat Party. She works for Adam Schiff in particular, has raised estimated $100 million for the Democrat Party, and she's literally raising money off the trial.
Wow.
And that's who this judge is, Marchand. And of course, yesterday they called their star witness, so-called, the ex-con, Michael Cohen, who during the testimony that we heard yesterday, repeatedly, multiple times, 6 or 7 times, acknowledged that he's committed perjury, that he's lied under oath, and no credibility whatsoever. They read his previous statements and he affirmed and acknowledged them, that where he had just said how much he wanted to get President Trump, wanted to see him rot in prison and those sorts of things, to retaliate against him for what he perceives as the harm done to him by President Trump. So you've got a star witness who has no credibility and also has motivation to try to harm the defendant, President Trump. So it was certainly an interesting day. It was great to have us back. We did a press conference afterwards, and with my House Freedom Caucus colleagues. It was an interesting day, to say the least.
Well, and it's certainly here in the 5th District, a lot was being made that both candidates, you and your opponent, your challenger, were both there for it. And I guess does it come down, because certainly President Trump did very well in 2020 in the 5th Congressional District. You were just endorsed by Turning Point USA, Charlie Kirk, the radio show host and the founder of Turning Point USA, huge college commitment there. Is that wind in your sail that is that much closer to what I'm sure both candidates are hoping would be a presidential endorsement?
Well, I don't know anything about what the president might or might not do. Obviously, everybody welcomes the support of President Trump and the Republican Party. But I would just say that we have the overwhelming amount of support in terms of endorsements, whether it's members of Congress, whether it is party leaders across the district, whether it's elected officials across the district, whether it's high-profile conservatives like Charlie Kirk and others. General Michael Flynn's endorsements coming. It's already been received, I should say. We're going to put that out soon, just as an example. So, support of overwhelmingly the grassroots, the volunteers, the door knockers. There's a reason why, and I liken my opponent's campaign to the Biden campaign with some similarities. President Trump has these multiple events with huge crowds on a presidential scale. Obviously, on the congressional scale, we don't have that kind of turnout, but we have dozens of events with large crowds. Matter of fact, last Thursday night, 8 days ago, we threw together a 24-hour notice, and in your old neck of the woods in Albemarle, Charlottesville, we had an event with Chip Roy. Matt Gaetz zoomed in. He had some flight issues, didn't make it, but it was less than 24 hours notice in the bluest part of my district, where numerically, at least, I would have the least amount of support. And we had 150 people pack out Steve Harvey's first free coffee. Yeah. First free coffee. Great play on words. Great event there with Steve Harvey hosting that for us there. But we had 150. We literally, Joe, in one event had more people with 24-hour notice than my opponents had for every event, so-called, that he's held, because he doesn't hold events. The other similarity with him in the Biden campaign is he refuses to debate. We've agreed to 7 dates, and my opponent hadn't agreed to any. The Amherst County Republican Committee asked us both to commit to 2 dates, May 13, May 20. We had agreed to both of those dates. And then Jeff Katz Radio out of Richmond area in the northeastern part of the district had offered 6 dates to host in studio. And Jeff Katz honestly leans towards my opponent. He's much more friendly to my opponent than he is to me. And we agreed to 5 of the 6 dates that Jeff Katz put out, and my opponent agreed to none. When have you ever seen a challenger not want to debate the incumbent? Of course, he can't, because he has no command of the issues, and he can't defend the lies on which his campaign is based.
Well, let me jump into one of your colleagues in the Virginia delegation, Senator Mark Warner from the Senate Intelligence Committee, yet saber rattling again yesterday in a press gaggle about election interference. And I put that in air quotes because it seems to be finding out something, hearing something is considered election interference. We just had a caller earlier. He said, well, when is somebody going to be prosecuted? The trial you were at yesterday is all about keeping a story out of the press, and that would be seen as election interference. But what about the Hunter Biden laptop? Didn't a lot of much bigger, more well-renowned newspapers collude to keep that out of the press? That kind of thing, it plays into these 45-day election cycles. We're currently voting in the 5th Congressional District primary. Talk about this narrative versus the work that's been done. Shouldn't this be about, hey, how have you performed in Congress? What have you done? Certainly your record has been nationally publicized. There shouldn't that be the end game of these campaigns?
Well, to the election interference, I'll just say, and relative to Senator Warner, 4 years ago, the Dems I believe, absolutely engaged in trying to rig the 2020 election. You could obviously say they were successful in doing that. It began with suppression of information, suppression of viewpoints, collusion with big tech, and to block the views of some, to block some stories that were positive for Trump or negative to Biden, and to promote other stories that were positive for Biden and negative to Trump. You mentioned the Hunter Biden laptop story. There was the phony Russian collusion scandal. There was the dirty Steele dossier. There was also, in the name of COVID, suppression of information in the name of COVID, but there was also changing of election processes in states in the name of COVID to make it easier to cheat, unsolicited mail ballots and so forth. But in 2024, Joe, I think it's even more explicit and more brazen, if you will, because as soon as President Trump declared that he was going to run, they first tried to keep him off the ballot. The Supreme Court had to step in and prevent that. Now they're trying to weigh him down financially and logistically with having him sitting in the court hearing 3 days this week. And so to keep him off the campaign trail, to sap his resources with defending himself, and ideally want to try to put him in jail. It's like this judge, the judge in the other New York case said, okay, you got to pay the $500 million fine while you're awaiting appeal. You never have to, because then imagine that, just the travesty again of the miscarriage of justice there, that under appeal, before it's determined whether or not you actually have to, let's make you suffer the consequence and have to pay the fine. Of course, thankfully, it was ultimately reduced to something that was huge, but by most people's standards, obviously, to $175 million, I think it was. But so they're trying to put him in jail. I think he'll ultimately be exonerated of all of these charges, but the process is the punishment. And but I think these are trumped up charges, pun intended, and he'll ultimately be cleared on all of these.
Well, and we're watching in Washington right now, President Biden, I'm going to get in trouble with my wife for using the two words in conjunction, Bob, but the president is now exercising executive privilege to keep us from hearing audio tapes recorded in the Oval Office. When have we heard this story before? And is regarding salient, I think, campaign issues, his documents, the document disposal. We found out conversations that were had in the Oval Office under President Obama that the vice president at the time were involved with regarding the Steele dossier and things like that. This executive privilege thing, they didn't allow President Trump to invoke it. Why are they all of a sudden saying, well, yeah, we can't hear these tapes because executive privilege?
Well, we know what it's really about, of course. They don't want us to hear him demonstrating that he is what was, quote, a sympathetic elderly man with a poor memory. They don't want us to hear firsthand that he didn't remember when he was vice president and that he was confused about the time frame. They don't want us to hear firsthand that he was confused about when his son tragically died from cancer, early death. They don't want us to hear what made the special prosecutors say, you know what, this is not worth bringing charges against, because a jury would find him sympathetic and find that he just doesn't have the ability to remember these things because of his diminished state, his diminished capacity. That's the real truth, as we know, and everybody knows.
Well, in the things coming up in 2024, obviously the presidential derby, but I was just reading a piece, Bob, that the Democratic leadership, Schumer and Jeffries, are talking about a radical reform to filibuster so that a one-vote majority can completely change the tenor of how the country is supposed to operate. Have you heard about this? And does this make what's going on here in the 5th District 2024 and even our neighboring 7th District important because they're trumpeting the fact that we're going to change the filibuster rules? They've talked about packing the Supreme Court again. They've said it, not some conspiracy theory. This makes this less just entertaining. There's some serious things afoot.
Well, that's why this election is so critically important. And the hope and prayer is that the people who have sort of been on the margins politically in terms of engagement and involvement. Good people who want the right things, who want safe streets, safe neighborhoods, a strong America, a secure border, a decent economy, a decent job, a better future for their kids, good education for their kids, those sorts of things, which are 80% issues, that the Democrats are wrong on everything, and we're worse off than we were 3 years ago on all of those, that those people will turn out and vote, and they've suffered enough under the Biden economy and the Biden administration, and they realize what's at stake, and they make their voice heard, and we overwhelm at the polls. Because, Joe, with what's happened in the last 3.5 years, can you just imagine 4.5 more years of that? If these people win, if Merrick Garland wins, if Secretary Mayorkas wins, if Christopher Wray wins, if what they're doing is allowed to continue under this administration, the harm that they would do, just the abuse of power, the disparate treatment of people from the judicial system, from the Department of Injustice and the federal law enforcement based on your political persuasion. You know, if you're exercise your Second Amendment rights, or you're a concerned parent at a school board meeting, or you're a pro-life protester, and they send a SWAT team in tactical gear to arrest you in front of your children because you're a pro-lifer, those sorts of things. So you take that, and then, as you said, Joe, if they were to retain power, you know, when they lose the election, let's change the Electoral College. Let's pack the Supreme Court, as you said, because we don't like how the court is behaving, or how the ruling, I should say. And to your point, let's make Puerto Rico a state. Let's make D.C. a state. So let's change the rules to rig it even further, and let's change the filibuster, which was something that, you know, it's not exactly in the Constitution, as you know, but that it was designed that it would be a more deliberative body, the saucer that cools the drink, so to speak, that would have that benefit of the bicameral body that wouldn't. The houses, two houses, are supposed to act independently and then come together and negotiate between what they do. But they better be careful, because I think we're going to win the Senate. And if we can do whatever we want to do with 51 votes, they might regret that. So I haven't heard about the latest move. I just recognize that they want to do whatever they can to have absolute power.
Well, Congressman, I know it's getting time. We have to let you go. But do you have any thoughts as we come to the wrap-up of National Law Enforcement Appreciation Week before we head out? I know that you've done quite a bit with law enforcement. Talk about that a moment.
Yeah, and I'm thankful. Just last week, we got the support of the Police Benevolence Association in Virginia. They actually bring in all the candidates and vet them and interview them, and grateful to have their support. It was really an exhausting process to go through with them, and I'm grateful to have their support. But just thankful for the people every day, all over our communities, all over our Commonwealth, all over our country, certainly here in the 5th District, that run into harm's way, that put on the badge every day and get up, and they don't know what they're going to face that day. They don't know if they're going to come home safely. And we're just so grateful to them. And we need to stand behind them, have their backs the way they have our backs. And we know that, frankly, sadly, the Democrat Party does not.
Well, certainly, and in general, we need to make sure that they have consistent and enforceable laws in the simplest, so that justice can be served. Congressman Good, you have a wonderful weekend, and we'll talk to you again next Friday.
God bless, my friend. Thank you.
Bye. And for you all, thank you for joining us on this Friday morning. And until next Friday, until Monday, really, until Monday, thank you for tuning in here on YouTube and on Rumble. Until next week, for all of us here at Joe Thomas in the Morning, so long, and thanks for all the fish.